It is my pleasure to be the first person to welcome you to the apocalyptic portion of our liturgical calendar. Did you notice the apocalyptic nature of our gospel reading today? Now, for those of us who have been studying together the book of Revelation, we know the definition of apocalypse doesn't mean what we've conjured it to mean in our minds, death and destruction and all kinds of disasters and things like that. Apocalypse literally in Greek means revelation. So when something is apocalyptic, it means that there is some kind of a revelation being communicated to us. Now, why do we have apocalyptic gospel readings starting this time of year? That seems kind of odd, doesn't it? And if we look over here at our calendar, we will note that the liturgical calendar did not always look the way that it looks now. In the early days of the church, this would have been in Advent. Advent would have been a lot longer than it is now. It would have been 40 days, just the same way Lent continues to be. And Advent started on November 11th, which was yesterday. Today's in this year's calendar. So November 11th was the start of the 40-day season of Advent, and Advent, of course, is a time to prepare. And Advent used to be known colloquially as St. Martin's Lent, because it was 40 days long, and it started on November 11th, which was the feast day of St. Martin of Tours. Now, St. Martin of Tours was a soldier and is the patron saint of soldiers and veterans. And coincidentally, the feast day of St. Martin de Tours, the patron saint of soldiers and veterans, his feast day happens to fall on the day that we now know as Veterans Day. It used to be Armistice Day in commemoration of the armistice that went into effect at 11 a.m. on November 11th to end World War I, the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, and eventually in this country became known as Veterans Day, which we had a remembrance, a flag ceremony before the service this morning in honor of Veterans Day. And by the way, now might be a good time for us to recognize our veterans. So if you would care to stand so that we can recognize our veterans who are here today, please do. And we have lots of veterans here. So, some are standing, some are not. You may be seated. Thank you. And thank you very much for being veterans and for your service to our country. But Advent used to be that 40-day observance, much longer than the 4 weeks that it is now, and the lectionary hasn't changed. So the lectionary never got updated to reflect that Advent is now only 4 weeks instead of 40 days. And so we get a lot of readings in Advent, and starting now, that remind us that the end could happen at any time, and we don't know when. And in today's story, we have another parable from Jesus, and this time he talks about the bridesmaids, some of whom were wise and some of whom were foolish. And the wise bridesmaids were the ones who were well prepared. They were the bridesmaids who brought not only their lamps, but enough oil to make sure that they kept operating. And the foolish bridesmaids brought their lamps, but didn't bring enough oil. They were unprepared, and Jesus is kind of telling us the importance of being prepared. Now, Jesus uses those words, wise and foolish, wise for the prepared and foolish for the unprepared. And I've got a confession to make. That's really bad news for a guy like me, because essentially Jesus is calling me foolish. Now, I've shared with you that I have something called ADHD, and that means that I have difficulty planning and preparing things. But fortunately, I surround myself by people who are good at planning and preparing. Your church office administration staff, for instance, is very good at making sure that I'm doing all the things that I need to do, like, say, for instance, prepare, a Sunday sermon. Father Tim, is your sermon ready? What sermon? Also, your vestry is very well prepared. and your deacon is very well prepared. He reminds me if I forget something that I need to do liturgically, he reminds me. So Deacon Chuck is very well prepared. Your vestry is very well prepared. Your wardens are very well prepared. Your wardens are both military veterans, and in their service time in the military, if they didn't know how to be prepared before their service, they certainly are prepared now. So I surround myself with people who help me to stay prepared, and including, by the way, my wife. My wife is a very good planner, and I am not so much. Now, what are the consequences of not being a good planner? I can give you a hypothetical. It's a hypothetical example. Let's say, for instance, you want to go see, a solar eclipse in October of 2023, so about a month ago. And let's say that you knew that solar eclipse was going to be happening for years ahead of time, and you knew you wanted to go to it, okay? And the day before the eclipse, you realize, well, maybe I should have booked a hotel room because I've got to drive 6 hours each way to go see this eclipse. And so on the day before the eclipse, when you're booking your hotel room, you realize that every hotel room in the place where you want to stay is completely booked, except for one room, and that one room happens to be a not very clean room in a not very nice motel that happens to be located at a truck stop, and the truck stop has bad blinds that don't close all the way, and there are bright lights that shine in that room all night. Right? So that may or may not have happened to this not good planner. And my wife, on the other hand, who is a good planner, knew that I wanted to see the upcoming eclipse as well. And she, a year ahead of time, booked a hotel room at a fancy hotel right in the path of the totality. A nice hotel. She booked it far enough in advance that it's not even a bad price. And it's going to be a nice hotel. So we're going to go see the other eclipse. And this time it's already planned because I was able to rely on my wife to do it. So we can see where planning is, if not wise, it is at least a good idea. Right? And it's good to be prepared and it's good to be ready, but what are we getting ready for? What is it that we're getting ready for? Now I'm going to ask you a question. Do you know what Advent gets us ready for? What's the white dot at the top of our calendar there? Do you remember? Christmas. Advent gets us ready for Christmas. You are absolutely right. Advent gets us ready for Christmas. And it also is a time when we get ready for those things that are not quite so expected. And we're ready for things that we don't know what to expect, right? And we've had a lot of conversations about what that looks like, right? We've had a lot of conversations about making sure that our finances are in good order, and we've made sure that we talk to our loved ones about what we would want them to decide for us if we find ourselves in a position where we're not able to speak for ourselves. That takes out the guesswork of our loved ones having to make decisions, right? And we've talked about the importance of taking care of our families and taking care of our church home. Today is In-Gathering Sunday, and it's a day that we do that. On paper, we say that we're going to take care of our church home. And it's a good idea to be prepared. If we're prepared, then we know that we can do a better job of what it is that we're supposed to be doing. Right? Athletes prepare for big games. They prepare year-round. They're practicing. And I recently saw a movie called Naiad about Diana Naiad, who was a long-distance swimmer who swam from Cuba to Florida. There's a movie now about her life and about her swim. And this swim is over 100 miles, and she went nonstop. And it took over 50 hours of nonstop swimming. And it took her 5 tries to do it. She finally did it, but it took her 5 tries. And while I'm watching this movie and I'm hearing this story and I'm watching her prepare and I'm watching how her strength training regimen and her exercise regimen and her breathing regimen, and she sets out to do this, and all I could think this whole movie is, why are you doing that? Why would you want to do that? But she wanted to do it, so I don't have any, good for her. But she prepared. The important thing is she prepared. She wanted to do this, and she did it. And if she hadn't prepared, she wouldn't have been successful. If I were to be dropped in the ocean between Cuba and Florida, I would probably be eaten by sharks. But she was prepared, so she was able to make this swim happen and to make it a reality. So preparation is important. And we want to work on not just those temporal things, but also our faith relationships, our relationships with God, our relationships with each other. Right? We want to have those in good order. Because we don't know when the end times is going to happen. The early apostles thought it was going to happen in their lifetime. That's why they didn't write down the Gospels until decades after the events happened, because they thought that the end was going to happen in their lifetime. When Jesus said, "I'm coming back," they thought that they were going to be able to see that. And then as they started dying off, they realized, well, we need to put this stuff down on paper because it hasn't happened yet and it might not happen. Well, here we are some 2,000 years later, and the end still hasn't come. So when is it going to come? Is it going to come in 5 minutes? I sure hope not, because I've got tickets to the football game later today. But it could. Right? What about the concert that I've got in a few months, right? That I've been waiting a long time for? Well, we don't know. We don't know. And we want to live our lives as if we don't know, because the truth of the matter is we don't. And here's where I get to share with you my observance of you as a worshiping congregation. I think St. John's is a wonderful place, partly because I see how well you prepare. I see how well prepared you are. And I see St. John's as an example that other parishes ought to look to if they need some help in doing their own preparation type homework. Right? Because what I see when I see this congregation, when I look at the people of St. John's, is I see a congregation that is good at avoiding sin and recognizing when we fall into sin and we do the right thing, we correct our course and go the right direction. I see a lot of that in each and every one of you here at St. John's. And I see a parish that is committed to serve. Not just within, but also outside the walls of the church. And in fact, probably far more of the service that takes place here at St. John's is service for people who never set foot inside our doors. And so I see that in action. And I think that is a wonderful thing. And it's a wonderful way that you serve as a roadmap for others to follow the example. And this place needs you. It needs you. The members of St. John's needs you in order to continue to do that. And when we talk about growing the church, we're not talking about growing the church because it brings more benefit to us. We're growing the church because there's so much love and joy here that we want other people to experience that love and that joy as well. And so when you have visitors come in the door, you welcome them in a way that hopefully shares some of that love and some of that joy, and maybe they have the opportunity to share some of that joy as well, and it keeps growing and snowballing. I see that in St. John's, and I think it's a wonderful gift that you have. So what do the bridesmaids do? The wise bridesmaids? We already know that Jesus says they have enough oil for when their lamps run out. But I'm going to say, at St. John's, you do one better than that. Because the bridesmaids said, when they were asked, they said, "Oh, well, we only have enough for us. We don't have enough to share." And the foolish bridesmaids were left outside the door. But when I see you in action at St. John's, I see a congregation that not only is prepared, but also a congregation that is willing to share some of your oil with somebody else who isn't quite so prepared. And I think that's even more noble than being prepared and not sharing the oil. And that's what I see when I see the people of St. John's in action. Now, as much good stuff as St. John's does, our work isn't over, and we have lots that we can build on. And over the next year, we're going to build on some of the things that we've already been doing. Those are some of the things that we're going to keep working on as a parish community. And I think we're off to a pretty great start. We don't know the day and we don't know the time. It could be 5 minutes from now, but it could be billions of years from now. But either way, the end can start today. The beginning of the end can start today. And so there isn't any better time to keep working on being prepared, being that prepared presence in the world that others can look to. And so we prepare with our pledges to make sure that our parish community is in good hands. We prepare with that continued ministry, that continued outreach ministry that shares the love of Christ in the world. And St. John's prepares with love. And so thank you for being prepared and for showing that loving face to so many people in our world that so desperately needs it. Thank you for being that loving presence. I'm going to ask you to continue that. Keep loving. Keep being that loving presence in the world. And when you do, we don't know, as we said, that we don't know the hour or the day. But we do know that when the end comes, everything is going to be okay. Amen.